Hello, Blake Simons from the Berkeley University Black Students Union. Thanks for joining us here at Important Call um, for to discuss the ongoing uprisings across the United States, the unrest. What's been your experience with the Black Lives Matter campaign so far?
Can you repeat that? It kind of lagged off a little there.
What's been your experience of the Black Lives Matter campaign so far? How have you been involved?
I've been involved predominantly through UC Berkeley's Black Student Union on campus. We've organized a lot of direct actions, specifically in Berkeley and also in Oakland as well. So that's been my predominant involvement, from shutting down our popular campus eatery, the Golden Bear Cafe, to having black brunch on 4th Street, to painting a big school icon, which is a big C. We painted that red, black, and green as well. And also to our most recent protest was shutting down main campus entrance during Cal Day, in which there was over 30,000 folks. We shut it down and made a barrier in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement that has been moving on throughout the country as we speak.
So it's been, you have had quite deliberately disruptive protest actions. What kind of numbers of people have been participating in the protests themselves?
Well, we've had a lot. At UC Berkeley, we're actually a small percentage. We're around 3% of the population. So that does definitely affect some of our organizing. But we've had a lot of folks participating in all of our protests, from shutting down the Golden Bear Cafe. Probably we had maybe over 100, 200 black people shutting down the cafe, and then we also had probably 400 or 500 people watching as we had different testimonials, different poems, sharing experiences of anti-Blackness on campus and also outside in the community too. Talking about anti-Blackness, in the classroom, oftentimes we deal with professors who are racially insensitive and where racial microaggressions occur daily.
I'm just curious. You say that the student body is only 3% black. What's the percentage like amongst the professors? Are there many black professors at Berkeley, or is it still very, very white, the staff?
It's still very, very white. There's not many. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's very, very white. The only, African American professors that I've had is in the Black Studies department. I know specifically in the political science department, there hasn't been a black professor yet. It's 2015 and they haven't had a black professor who studies political science. And there's plenty of black professors who study political science yet. We haven't had one yet. So UC Berkeley's political science is still in the zero club as far as black faculty.
That's pretty remarkable. What's been the reaction of this mainly white university to these protests? Has there been mostly positive and supportive reactions or confrontational?
It's been a mix of both. We definitely have strong allies, but we also have people who have been very aggressive towards our protests. For instance, when we shut down the barrier, we made a barrier at Sather Gate during Cal Day, which we claimed Black at Cal Day. We had
What's Cal Day?
Cal Day is basically the big university-wide event in which prospective students come to UC Berkeley and check out the campus. It usually draws around 30,000 to 40,000 people. And we shut down Sather Gate, which is one of the main entrances to campus. And we had a big Black Lives Matter barrier as well as black folks blocking the entrance. And during that, we had people who were supportive and went around. But we also had, older white men charging in, trying to get through the barrier, specifically targeting women as well. So we've had backlash, but we've also had a lot of positive allies too. But there's been a lot of backlash.
What's the sort of the corporate body corporate of the university been like? What's been the official reaction?
Can you repeat that, please?
Has there been a pronounced official reaction, a pronounced official reaction from the university officers?
Yeah, so the Black Student Union, in response, we've organized a few direct actions, and in response, the chancellor actually took notice, and he sent out a campus-wide email after effigies were found hanging on Sather Gate. We still don't know who was responsible for the effigies, but he released an email saying that he's been working with the Black Student Union, but he hasn't. So that ended up us, having a meeting with the chancellor in which we issued 10 demands to the university for institutional change at UC Berkeley, because, you know, he spoke about admitting to that there's been a, you know, a poor racial climate on campus, and that he's heard the stories of Black students feeling excluded. And this is something that we have been talking about. And it's also backed up by research in which they had a campus climate survey in which, you know, 50% of Black students felt like they've been disrespected and excluded from campus as well. So we had a meeting with the chancellor and we gave him 10 demands, and he's kind of, you know, there's been some bureaucratic stuff that has involved with the demands, and he's kind of sidewinded it and not wanted to address it point by point. So he's kind of, he hasn't been in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, to put it at best. He has not been in solidarity.
Okay, I just want to go back to the beginning then to make sure I understand. There were effigies found. These were effigies of who or what?
They were effigies of Black people that were hung on campus.
As in,
we don't specifically.
And the models were of them hanging from trees, like a lynching.
Yes, it was intended to look like a lynching. We don't know. It could have been somebody who was trying to make an artistic statement, or it could have been someone who was trying to make a threat. Because we did have a protest planned that day as well. So it could have. We don't know.
At first, you know, the first obvious reaction is that that's, you know, meant to be an intimidation. It's a tactic. It's meant to be intimidating people. It's meant to be reminding people of the history of white violence, but not in a way that's meant to be threatening. Do people feel like that was a threat? That was a threat to the students who were being active?
I mean, it could have been. You know, it's something that is very, you know, very triggering for myself at least. And this isn't the first time there's been, you know, nooses or effigies on campus. I know a few years back there was a pretty much kind of a zombie hanging from a fraternity house, and it was right across the street from the, you know, the African American floor the theme program, right? So this isn't the first time something like this has happened. There's been numerous instances. You know, personally, I've had like white professors openly use the N-word, and I've heard many stories from my classmates saying that this happened as well. So the effigies wasn't one isolated incident; it's a series of incidents that have happened on campus.
That's really, I mean, I came in. This is one of these. Doing this story is one of these reminders that, you know, racism in America is always sort of worse than you think it is once you start sort of poking it a little bit. But you know, it's surprising to me that people think of Berkeley as this sort of bastion of progressivism, and, you know, as a relatively cool place amongst the sort of higher end. I'm not sure if it's officially Ivy League universities, but of the prestigious universities in the States, it's thought of as one of the more sort of progressive and trendy ones. Is that all bullshit? I mean, what do you think of that impression?
I mean, I think that was my first impression coming to the university, thinking that it was going to be a progressive, liberal, you know, quote unquote, post-racial environment. But that changed very quick, you know, from nigger being carved in, you know, near my dorm wall my first couple weeks of my freshman year, to professors openly using the N-word, to, you know, white frat boys saying nigger, nigga. You know, so those are my first experiences, and I'm like, wow, this is supposed to be UC Berkeley. In an
awkward, I listen to hip hop kind of way, or in a threatening kind of fuck you kind of way, or a bit of both, or.
I mean, a bit of both. I mean, it's unexcusable for white people or non-Black people in general to say nigga or nigger. Unexcusable.
Okay. I'm just trying to get a sense of how, like, when you say there was something carved in near your dorm, do you think that was directed at you personally? Because, you know, there would be many Black people in one dorm, or people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was it was personal. I mean, when you carve in nigger on a dorm wall, when there's only 3 African people in that dorm area, yeah, I mean, it's personal because you know, there's not many of us there, so I took it as a personal shot.
Well, I mean, I'm shocked now hearing this, because, you know, when it's just not part of the sort of international image that you get of Berkeley, and I'm curious to know. I mean, how much of during since the sort of Mike Brown, Freddie Gray era, this sort of succession of times where black men have been killed and there's been evidence of it, and it's managed to sort of go viral and get a headline. How has it affected race relations on campus?
Well, as a black student, this is nothing that has been new. You know, it's all black people have been targeted and executed by the police. Berkeley, for instance, Kayla Moore, a black transgender woman, she was executed by Berkeley police in a similar fashion to Eric Garner. You know, her very last words could have been, "I can't breathe," as well. But, you know, unfortunately, I mean, sometimes we always have the normative claim that it's just black men, but it's been black women as well, black trans folk, black LGBT. So it's not all just black men, but I think it's brought in race to the forefront. On campus, it's brought, you know, racial, you know, when we have our direct actions, you know, we see backlash from people like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Or, "Oh, why do you wear a black power sweatshirt? That's racist." Or, you know, it's a lot of times we'll talk about race in the classroom and it's like, there's only one black person in the class and everybody looks at you like, oh, as if, you know, you're the token Negro to represent the whole race, right? So I think there has been some racial backlash. I mean, it's existed on this campus since its foundation, and now people are just talking about it. So it's nothing that is so foreign. This is something that's been going on since this campus was founded, right? It's nothing that's foreign. There's been black organized protests on this campus for years. You know, the shutdown of Sather Gate, that wasn't the first time black students have done that. It's been something that's historically been done by black students addressing the racial microaggressions and addressing the racial climate on campus, and nothing has been done to change it. And, you know, the Black Student Union came up with 10 demands, and for campus to be better, Chancellor Dirks should agree to the demands if he wants to be an ally to the black.
Those demands are?
Yeah, I could tell them to you right now. One of the first demands is the creation of a Black Student Development Resource Center, which is to be a designated office space as well as for hosting events on a central campus location. Right now, we don't have much space on campus specifically for black students. There's just a very small little office, which we have. And then another demand is demanding 2 permanent full-time black admission staff members with enhanced recruitment strategies to help actively recruit black students to UC Berkeley. And then another is a full-time program director to work with the recruitment and retention center within Bridges Multicultural Resource Center. And then as well, 2 full-time black psychologists in Berkeley who, you know, have an understanding of the specific black experience at Cal. And, you know, so it's like we don't have to go into a psychologist and tell them the struggles of what it means to be black. And we have somebody who already understands that. As well as we want 2 full-time black student athlete development advisors to be available and provide mentorships and academic guidance for all black student athletes, because a lot of the black population at UC Berkeley is black student athletes. Which also brings, you know, another hypocritical aspect, because you have these black football players and black basketball players and black soccer players making the university and representing the university and making the university a lot of money, yet black students don't have resources on campus. You know, 4 out of 10 black athletes are graduating, right? So it's like they make money off of black athletes, but they don't give them academic support. And then another is demanding getting into graduate school is a mentorship program to be doubled in order to expand the program. Also, we demand the immediate creation of a committee to submit recommendations for the aggressive recruitment and retention of black staff and faculty within and outside the African American Studies Department. Just to, you know, as I was speaking about the political science department not having 1 black professor, we are demanding change that, you know, there are black professors on campus. Another is we're demanding the name of Barrows Hall to be changed to Assata Shakur Hall. Specifically, Barrows, he was a colonizer of Africa as well as the Philippines, and that hall holds the African American Studies Department, the Gender Women's Studies Department, Ethnic Studies Department, and it's named after a colonizer. Furthermore, we have, you know, buildings such as LeConte that are named after slave owners, racist slave owners on campus, right? So we're trying to change some of that as well. Another demand is a full funding of the ACES scholarship program. And then we also are demanding the Chancellor, the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, and the Vice Chancellor of Equity and Inclusion, and the Dean of Students to meet with members of the Black Student Union, the Black Recruitment and Retention Center, and the African American Student Development at least once every academic semester, so we can work on these things and make UC Berkeley an institution that is hospitable for Black students on campus. So yeah, those are 10 of our demands.
What's the ACES scholarship?
ACES is a program at UC Berkeley. It's American Cultures and Engaged Scholarship. Basically, it's a program that talks about different cultures. Pretty much, it's like a cultural program, right? So you learn more about different cultures, right? So it's like almost like a diversity, understanding diversity and stuff like that. So I think education is very important, and when you're not educated on the Black struggle specifically, and just minority struggle in this country, it just breeds an environment for ignorance, and ignorance often breeds racism as well, and racial microaggressions.
When you describe the program, it sounds it doesn't sound particularly radical. It sounds very bureaucratic and very much kind of the sort of what an administrator would describe as a full court press. This is what's surprising to me is that there's not a policy like this already at, again, what was I'd considered one of the more progressive universities. Moving away from the university context for a little bit, the broader, have you been participating off campus at all, or are you in touch with people who've been involved in protests in other parts of the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the cool things about Twitter is I'm able to, stay updated from different activists throughout the country, right? So, I'm able to see what's going on in Baltimore through my Twitter feed, through, people like DeRay, Netta, stuff like that. So I'm able to, I feel like, be connected with what's going on and listen to Black voices. Oftentimes the media frames it in a certain way. So I'm able to see what's going on from people on the ground, from Black voices on the ground, to where there's not this normative, Fox News bias or this CNN bias as well. So you could really get direct information. But yeah, I mean, I'm personally, I've been involved in protests in Oakland as well as Berkeley outside of the campus.
Okay. I've been, of course, at the moment, the focus is Baltimore. So one thing that I've been asking a lot of people about is the opinions of your namesake, David Simon. Of course, for someone like me from Australia, a lot of the time, like everything I know about Baltimore comes from The Wire, everything. So, and until now, I'd always thought of him as having a real sort of a feeling for the people of the inner city, with his work's been very much focused on them. But there seems to be a bit of a rift between what he's been saying and what the sort of Black people participating in the movement have been saying a lot of the time. I was wondering, in particular, he said in an interview, he emphasized class over race as a cause of police brutality, although he admits that it's impossible to sort of say where one ends and the other begins. And in another interview, he was saying that in a blog post, that he said that people who can't express their anger without a brick in their hand should go home. Was the basic line, which seems to be a dig at those smashing storefronts or police cars, as well, or it doesn't really differentiate between violence to people and damage to property. What's your impression watching Baltimore from afar of what do you think is going on there from what you're seeing on social media, and what do you think of the sort of the white middle class reaction to it, which David Simon kind of, I think, epitomizes the white left wing middle class reaction?
Yeah. I think if the white middle class reaction was as angry as it was with broken windows and burnt property, as it was with Black lives being systematically executed by the police, then maybe we could come together as one country. If they had that same anger for broken windows as they do, if they had that same anger to Black lives being executed, we might be able to get somewhere, right? And oftentimes people are talking about violent protests, but violence is not breaking a window. Violence is not a CVS burning. Violence is a broken spine. Violence is Walter Scott being shot at 8 times in the back, and then the officer handcuffing him and dropping a taser. That is violence. It's a clear distinction from windows being broken, because you could always replace a broken window, but you can't replace a taken life that has been taken by the cops, right? And there has been peaceful protests, right? There's been peaceful protests in Baltimore, but the only time people are now paying attention is when a building is being lit on fire, right? So when you don't give the option for people to peacefully protest and to bring these issues to the forefront, we're only talking about Baltimore because the CVS burnt, because people are upset over property damage, right? So when you don't give an option, you make windows being broken the only option, right? Martin Luther King once said, "A riot is the language of the unheard," right? And this is what's going on.
One thing I've noted in one of my interviews is this is a period of a lot of white people quoting Martin Luther King and a lot of black people in sort of finding his calls for nonviolence and repeating them back at him. But I think there's also a big difference in the way people perceived Martin Luther King at the time. He was described as a troublemaker, and there was violence at the fringe of his movement, which people presented as being the essential reality of his movement. Is, there would be riots sometimes after associated with actions, going on at the same time as actions that his group was taking, right? And then that would be what the violence of the time would be what they directed at him. He was not seen as a peacemaker very much at the time, although he did use that language a lot. The other question I would like to ask, and is what I've been asking everyone so far, is the situation of police violence towards black people getting worse? Am I just becoming more aware of it, or is it just a product of the fact that there's more and more camera phones and people are becoming more and more aware of the ability to capture police in the act of doing something wrong?
This isn't something that is new. This is something that has been occurring since the very foundation of this country, right? The origins of policing is slave patrols, and people oftentimes forget that the origin of policing is slave patrols, the controlling of black people in this country, right? So it's the system of policing has never really changed. It's just been institutionalized, and we have this incarceration system that values arresting black people, right? You have the 13th Amendment that pretty much legalizes slavery, right? If you commit a crime. I'm
sorry, again, I'm straight. Which is the 13th Amendment?
It's what supposedly eradicated slavery, but it actually reinvented slavery. It legalized slavery. So it pretty much says that if you commit a crime, you're service to involuntary servitude, which means you're still a slave. And then now you have this incarceration system that is disproportionately targeted black people in this country, in which, there's more black people under institutional control now than during slavery, right? So it's this different system, but now we're able to, film it, right? Black people were talking about police brutality before Rodney King, but now it was the first time that it was caught on video, right? And now we're seeing with Twitter, with our smartphones, we're able to capture a photo, capture a video, and instantly send it out to all of our followers for the world to see. We have that platform in which we are usually silenced. Black people now through social media are able to record, take photos, and be able to spread our own message and have our own platform. So this is something that isn't new, something that's been going on, but to social media, it has been some form of way we can have our voices heard. And, without social media, we probably wouldn't be here, right? There was over 1 million tweets before Mike Brown was covered by mainstream news, right? And that's just demonstrates the power of social media.
So, in a sense, you see this as somewhat of a cautiously optimistic moment, because this is a problem that's been ongoing, and now some light is being shone on the topic. It's of the police brutality is actually ratcheting up in the last year or two, or anything like that.
Yeah, it's something that's been going on, right? I think, in 2013, every 28 hours, a black person was executed by a police officer, or a self-appointed vigilante, or a security force, and now we're seeing it's almost every 9 hours so far this year. A black life has been taken by the police, by the cops. So wow. It's something that is going on. Because, each dismissal, each non-indictment, and each time an officer is not charged and brought to quote unquote justice, it gives another officer an opportunity to say, hey, oh, I could do this and I can get away with it, right? So our justice system is setting the standard of allowing cops to get away with murder, murder on
You
TV,
mentioned
right?
before, you mentioned before that people are more upset about broken windows, and we see more of these calls for people to sort of, restrain themselves, black people to restrain their anger, and sort of protest nicely than we do sort of outrage about the actual violence that sparked the protest. Well, you can see the same thing in terms of legal ramifications. The young man who smashed a police car window with other people is now has a higher bail than the police officers who killed Freddie Gray. So even though both have been charged, it looks like he might he has a higher bail and he might do longer time for smashing a police car than the guy who killed a person.
And that's a perfect example of white supremacy favoring white property over black life. That's a perfect example for you right there. The fact that he's still in jail right now for breaking a window while these killer cops are out for free, out on bail, roaming the streets as if nothing happened, that is a perfect example of white supremacy.
Thank you very much for your time. I think I've got a lot of great material from you already, but is there anything that you really feel like you want to have included in the interview before we sign off? Anything that I should have asked?
I think that's about it.
Okay.
Unless you have any other questions.
If I have any further questions, I'll send you follow up via email. But thank you very much for your time. Thanks for joining us at Important Call. I'll make sure I send you a link when the story's up.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.